Hello, everyone, and welcome. This discussion is brought to you by the team at ProTax Accountant, and today we're tackling a question that we see popping up all over the internet, causing a whole lot of confusion. Do Muslims in the UK actually have to pay council tax? Well, today we're going to cut right through all that noise and give you the clear, simple, factual answer. So let's get right into it.
So let's just think about what's being claimed here. Could there really be a tax exemption for almost 4 million people in the UK? I mean, that's a huge claim, right? It's the kind of thing you see shared on social media or in WhatsApp groups. And honestly, when things like that go unchecked, they can cause a lot of misunderstanding. So we're going to unpack exactly where this idea even comes from, and most importantly, what the law actually says.
To do that, we've put together a really clear, fact-based guide. Our goal here is simple. We want to show you exactly how the rules work for everyone, no matter your faith or your background. That way, you can walk away feeling confident that you know the real facts.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll start with the absolute basics of council tax. Then, we're going to tackle that question of faith head on and completely debunk the prayer room myth. But we're not stopping there. After that, we'll look at the real ways you might get a discount. And you'll want to stick around for this last part. We'll finish up with some solid, practical advice on how you can challenge your bill and potentially save yourself hundreds of pounds. All right, let's get started. Okay, Section 1, the basics. Before we can bust any myths, we all need to be on the same page about what council tax really is. Because, what it actually pays for might be more than you think. And the way it's calculated, well, it has a pretty surprising history. So, in the simplest terms, council tax is that bill you get from your local council. It's what funds all the stuff that keeps our towns and cities running. We're talking about bin collections, street cleaning, looking after the local parks, fixing all those potholes, and keeping our libraries open. It's a tax specifically on the places we live, our homes. And look, it's not a small chunk of change. The average bill for what they call a Band D property in England is now over £2,000 a year. Now, that number changes depending on where you live, but it gives you an idea of what a big expense this is for most families. And here's a little did you know for you. The band your property is in is still based on how much it was worth way back in 1991. Just think about that for a second. Your bill today is based on a valuation from over 30 years ago. It's a system that a lot of people argue is pretty unfair. So who actually has to cough up the cash? Well, the law is super specific about this. It sets out this kind of pecking order. As you can see, the main responsibility falls on the person who owns and lives in the property. If that's not the case, it moves down the list to tenants and so on. The key thing to remember is that who pays is tied to the property, not to who you are as a person. And if there are a few adults living there, they're all considered jointly liable, which means the council can ask any one of them for the full amount. Okay, so now we've got the what and the who sorted. The rules are all about the property and who lives there, with a valuation system that's a bit of a time capsule from the 90s. Now we can get to the real heart of the matter. Does your religion, specifically being a Muslim, change any of this at all? And the answer, to be perfectly clear, is no. It's a hard no. Council tax law in the UK is secular. That means it applies to every single resident in a domestic property in exactly the same way. There are no special clauses, no hidden loopholes, no provisions that give an exemption based on someone's faith, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Hindu, or have no faith at all. Everyone living in a home is treated the same under this law. So if the law is that clear-cut, where on earth does this rumor keep coming from? Well, it almost always comes down to one single, widely shared myth, the idea of a prayer room exemption. So let's separate the fact from the fiction on this one. And stay with me here. This next point is where all the misunderstanding comes from. Okay, this slide right here gets to the absolute core of the whole thing. You see, UK tax law has this huge line drawn in the sand between two types of property. It's like they exist in two totally different tax universes. Your home is a domestic property and it's subject to council tax. A mosque, on the other hand, just like a church or a synagogue, is classified as a non-domestic property. And those buildings have a completely different tax called business rates. And yes, as official places of public worship, they are exempt from those rates. The entire myth comes from people confusing these two completely separate systems. Setting aside a room in your house for prayer doesn't magically reclassify your home. It's still a domestic property, and you are still liable for council tax. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. This isn't just an opinion. It's a cold, hard, legal fact. The House of Commons Library, that's the impartial, super authoritative research service that members of Parliament use, has stated very clearly that any claims about a prayer room exemption have absolutely no basis in law. It's a myth that's been debunked time and time again. So we've cleared up what doesn't get you a discount. Let's move on to something way more useful. What does? The system does have real, legitimate exemptions and discounts, but they're all based on very specific circumstances, not on your faith. The way it works is that the council sometimes disregards certain people when they add up the bill, and this can lead to a 25% or even a 50% discount. As you can see on the list, this includes people like full-time students, apprentices, and live-in carers. The crucial thing to get here is that it's their circumstances that matter, not their personal beliefs. A Muslim student is disregarded for being a student, just like a Christian student or an atheist student. The rule applies to the situation, not the person. Now, you might have just spotted members of specific religious communities on that last slide and thought, aha, I knew it. There it is. But this is a perfect example of why the details matter so much. This particular exemption is extremely narrow. It's designed for people in communities like monasteries or convents. Think monks or nuns who live together, have no personal income, and have devoted their lives to their faith. It absolutely does not apply to a family living in their own house on a normal street.
Right. So the rules apply to everyone equally, but that doesn't mean the council always gets your bill right. Now we're getting to what I think is the most practical part of this whole discussion, something that applies to every single person paying this tax. How to make sure you're not overpaying. This is the bit that could literally put money back in your pocket.
So if you have a feeling your property is in the wrong council tax band, there is a formal process you can follow to challenge it. And I know it might sound a bit intimidating, but it really just breaks down into these 4 logical steps. You start with some basic online research. Then you pull together your evidence. After that, you submit your challenge to the Valuation Office agency. And if you need to, you can take it further. It is your right as a taxpayer to make sure you're being charged fairly. And here's a fantastic pro tip to get you started on that. In literally less than 2 minutes, you can hop on the official government website, put in your postcode, and see the council tax bands for every other house on your street. If you see that your home is in a higher band than your neighbor's identical houses, well, that's powerful evidence, and you could have a really strong case for an appeal. And please don't think this is a waste of time. Just look at these numbers from a single year in England. 30,000 challenges were submitted, and of those, a massive 40% were successful. That's 12,000 households that got their band reduced. For a lot of them, that went saving hundreds of pounds a year. Many even got a refund for the years they'd overpaid. It's a win that keeps on giving, because your bills will be lower every single year after that. Whew, we have covered a lot of ground, from the absolute basics of the tax to the myths and the practical steps of the appeals process. So let's bring it all together for the final verdict and make sure we lock in the key takeaways from our chat today. So let's quickly recap what you need to know. First, council tax is for everyone. It's a tax on homes, and your religion just doesn't come into it. Second, while places of worship like mosques are exempt from business rates, that has zero to do with your home. Third, the prayer room exemption is 100% a myth. Fourth, the real discounts are based on circumstances defined by law, like being a student. And finally, and this is the most important one for you, everyone has the right to challenge their council tax band if they believe it's wrong. Of course, trying to navigate any kind of tax rules can get complicated, and that includes council tax appeals. If you want to be absolutely sure you're not overpaying on your property, your business, or your personal tax, then talking to an expert is always a good idea. The team at ProTax Accountant is here to help, and you can get in touch with them using the details you see right here on the screen. We'll end with this one final thought. The myths about who pays council tax are exactly that, myths. The rules apply equally to everyone. But mistakes in the system, those are very real. So the real question isn't about faith, it's about fairness. Now that you know the facts, are you sure you're paying the right amount? Go check your band. And for more clear, factual guides on UK tax, make sure to subscribe to the ProTax Accountant YouTube channel. Thanks so much for watching.